Speaking of the 49ers, Deebo Samuel has made some news.
Fifth string running back. What could possibly
Scored
go
a
wrong?
touchdown last week.
The only parallel I can think of to me starting Patrick Taylor in a do-or-die playoff game is when the Bears had Caleb Haney in the NFC title game going against the Packers. Very much, bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
The Niners have been in the news this week. Deebo Samuel, in some form, now deleted tweet, but said, I'm healthy, I'm just not getting the ball. Of course, Kyle Shanahan was asked about that exact deleted tweet by the media this week.
I always love things to stay in-house. That's probably why I don't mess with social media. I'm sure I'd get worked up and stuff too if I was reading stuff about myself all the time, and then I'd maybe make a tweet or something. But that's, I mean, is it a distraction in our building? No. I mean, we've got to answer questions about it. It's the first time I've talked about it is right here. But, I mean, Deebo and I see each other every day and talk about stuff every day. So my advice is to not let outside frustrate you because just answering those things isn't going to help you in any way. Usually only hurt you. But as far as like what we deal with in our relationships and our team, it's water under the bridge.
Well, Matthew, no matter how Kyle Shanahan views this, Deebo's got 4 straight games with under 25 receiving yards, which is kind of hard to fathom.
He's been bad over that stretch. Those past 4 weeks, he's wide receiver 88 in fantasy points per game. Yeah, he's
The
like
new
my guy
eights.
8s. Yeah, the new 8s. Right. He's averaging 4.7 points per game. Under 5 fantasy points per game in those 4 games, as you see it there on your screen against the Seahawks, Packers, Bills, and of course last week against the Bears. So it's just been a bad stretch here for Deebo. You get why he tweeted it. I understand his frustration. I think the fantasy managers that have Deebo, a 2-time friend of the podcast, we've had Deebo on a couple of times here on the show, so we love Deebo here. I'm going to keep it open on Deebo, like reluctantly. He's my wide receiver 32, but here's my argument. First off, I think just squeaky wheel. I just, because of all this, and maybe it just sort of points out, like they try to get him the ball. Feels like he always kills the Rams, right? In his last 4 games against Los Angeles, dating back to 2021, he's had at least 22 fantasy points in all 4 of those games against LA. I mean, we think about this Rams defense that just gave up 56 fantasy points to the Bills wide receivers last week as well. And you also think about on a short week, if we don't know if Guarendo's going to play or not, but if Isaac Guarendo is out or even if he's limited, are they really going to – the Niners need to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. And so are they really going to go full bore with Patrick Taylor and, Izzy Abandokonda?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So practice squad fodder. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So could you see Deebo Samuel get 3-4 touches in the backfield in this game and in an important game as well? So I just think they try to find different ways to get him the ball because of the matchup, because of the squeaky wheel, and because of his ability in the backfield and given the situation with their other running backs.
It's fair. The only thing about that is we saw the numbers on the screen, so there's no need. Yeah, there's no need to harp on that anymore. But the fact that the 49ers were able to score 38 points, and Deebo was barely a part of any type of that production, that's what worries you the most. It's like we know Deebo could end up having a big game here, but the fact that they scored almost 40 points. And it was Jennings and Kittle and Guarendo, Patrick. Speaking of Patrick Taylor, he was more fantasy relevant than Deebo Samuel was. He was a top 30 running back just because of the touchdown. So I'm going to close it out. If he gets that 22 points that he averages against the Rams, it'll just be on my bench. If I had him, I don't, but I'm going to close it out on Deebo.
On Deebo. We're not that far removed from 2021 when Deebo Samuel had about 1,800 scrimmage yards, 14 touchdowns, missed a couple of games that year too. Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor were the 2 best skill position players that season. Deebo Samuel had a very good case to be 3rd. I don't think that guy is totally gone. But, and also, these last 4 weeks, it's been really bad. So under 25 receiving yards in each game, to your point. But I do think there is additional context there. One of those games was without Brock Purdy. It was just a disaster against the Packers. Another game was the weird snow game against the Bills. And then the Seahawks game, he still got 7 targets. He just couldn't reel it in. And then the Bears game, the game was done by halftime. Right. So, look, there's 4 different occasions where you're giving a caveat to make Deebo look better. But I do think that the main thing is Matthew's point that I just think that they're going to feed him against the Rams. It's a very suspect defense. He has lit up the Rams in the past. Probably my favorite Deebo moment the past few years is when he absolutely trucked Jalen Ramsey in that touchdown against the Rams not too long ago. So I think that Deebo He's set at 49.5 receiving yards on DraftKings, so I think he'll get 50 yards. He'll have some rushing value as well, chance of a touchdown. So I would keep it open with Deebo and trust the talent, but it has been grim lately.
Yeah, and it's the playoffs, right? I mean, so it's a little bit risky territory here, so it depends on sort of how you feel. But I think more often than not,
Jordan Addison or Deebo?
Addison.
What about Waddle?
Waddle's closer. I mean, Addison is a must start at this
Waddle
point,
for me.
but probably Waddle, yeah.
But you would say he's in that.
But he's in that range.
That bucket. Yep.
He's in that range. Yeah, I mean, like, he's in the, like, if you go further down, like he's, it's like Deebo Samuel or like, Keenan Allen or Rome Odunze. Like, I'd rather go Keenan Allen. I mean, I'm sorry, I'd rather go Waddle. I mean,
Deebo. I will go Deebo there too.
What's going on?
For
a lot of different names.
Because for the
I
Bears,
told you I'm bad with names.
It all goes back to the open.
That Palmalicious ointment stat tells me his memory. The other thing too is that he's so far behind Juwan Jennings, which would have been crazy coming into the season. Juwan Jennings, his receiving prop is 20 yards higher.
You mentioned Deebo being wide receiver 88 the past 4 weeks. Juwan Jennings has been wide receiver 13.
Yeah.
In that span, so just for people to see, and where those two were drafted, one wasn't even drafted at all in some leagues.
John Jennings is just Brandon Ayuk. Like, he's just taken that role. He's got the same telepathic connection with Purdy. His receiving prop is like exactly the same what Brandon Ayuk's was set last year.
The role.
He's just taken that role.
Yeah, and he's produced with it. He's been unbelievable. The other thing is, I do believe in the squeaky wheel narrative.
Yes.
When you think about what they've paid Deebo, his importance to that team. Like, it doesn't always work out, but more often than not, I sort of feel like it does when it's a big name player. When it's a big name player and it's a big name player that has a point.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You need for the long haul of this season.
You know what? Actually, and I always feel like this because it always happens. Like A.J. Brown, I feel like he's about to have a big week this week.
Of course, exactly.
So you could say the same for Deebo. Like, when these dudes say something on social media or to the media, it happens. Like, this has already happened for A.J. Brown. He's like said something in the past. Next week he goes out 130 yards in the TD. So,
Well, things have been rough for Deebo. They've been worse for Jayden Reed, guys. 3 or fewer receptions in 6 of his past 7 games. He had the goose egg last week, Jay. This was the guy that we thought could be the leading receiver for the Packers, and there's no consistency at all.
They just run the ball too much. And one, it's working because Josh Jacobs is having this incredible year and is gathering steam as the season goes on. And then 2, my sense is that I'm not entirely sure that LaFleur totally trusts Love. And I think that he wants to not hide Jordan Love because he's Jordan Love and he played in an elite level last season and he's shown MVP flashes, but he is very erratic and he can be shaky and he has bad plays. And I think that what LaFleur wants to do is run the ball as much as he can and then take deep shots. And the deep shot aspect has been going more to Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks. I still think Jayden Reed is the best receiver on that team though, and I think there are worse options that you can have. And so I would be I think that coming into the playoffs, you just can't trust any of these guys. Again, relative to position, the guy you probably trust the most is Tucker Kraft, Matthew.
Former grape slapper.
Grape slapper.
Yeah, former great slapper. You can send him his ring if you end up getting to the title.
Need him back.
Yeah. Look, I think that's the exact point. It's just like somebody on the Packers will have a good game on Sunday. We just have no idea who it is. I was so excited about Jayden Reed coming into the season, but it just hasn't been there recently. Since week 7, he's wide receiver 51 on a points per game basis. He's got an under 14% target share over that stretch. He's not even running 67% of the routes. Like, has a below 67% route participation here. And to your point about Jordan Love, I mean, look, the thing is that if you're Matt LaFleur and you're like, look, we're running the ball really well, we're playing good defense, and it's working. Yes, they lost to the Lions, I get it, but they were right in that game, and so now they've got to go on the road to Seattle, which is always a really tough place to play. Mike McDonald's got that defense playing at a very high level. The Seahawks are the 3rd best scoring defense over the last month. And so if you're Matt LaFleur, like, I get it. You want to you're going to try to, what's been working for you works even better on the road to Seattle. Try to take the 12th man out of it. They call it the 12th man. The real 12th man is in Aggie land at Texas A&M. Let's be clear about that, but I don't want to get a whole thing. It is. No, Seattle literally has to pay a royalty to Texas A&M.
Is that right?
This is true. There's there's a legal contract.
I did not know.
It started at Texas A&M, and then Seattle kind of stole it, but and now they legally rent it.
They're licensing it.
No, they're licensing it.
Yeah.
This is true.
This is good for Texas.
What a society we live in.
You see NIL prices these days?
Yeah, I know. Believe me, A&M needs it. Anyway, tough place to play. What do you want to do? You want to run the ball, take that crowd out of it, and try to limit the mistakes on Jordan Love. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm not crazy about Love this week in fantasy. You feel good about Josh Jacobs. You feel good about Tucker Kraft. But any of the wide receivers, I don't feel good about at all. And so I'm closing it out with Jayden Reed. He's my wide receiver 41 this week.
You feel good about the Packers receivers as a collective, knowing that somebody could have
someone will go off,
have a decent game. To be quite honest, if you're playing football and winning the way the Packers are on offense, that's what any team want to do. Like, if any team could just say, hey, let's run the ball, play defense, and win, like any team would choose that, no matter how good your quarterback is. In this particular case, for Jayden Reed, he's got 73 receiving yards in his last 4 games. That used to be like a single game with a couple of touchdowns the first half of the season.
Used to be a single reception.
Yeah, which would then, end up a 140-yard game. So I'm going to close it out on Reed as well.
Our last wide receiver here, guys, Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got New England. I mean, the good thing with Marvin Harrison Jr., he does get a lot of targets. The bad thing is here, Lawrence, he's only got 1 game with more than 60 yards since week 4. We haven't seen the explosive performances from Marv that we thought we'd get this year.
This is why, because when he doesn't get a touchdown, he averages 6.5 fantasy points per game. The thing is, he got 7 receiving touchdowns this season, and New England has allowed a touchdown to a receiver in 3 straight games. He's only got 2 double-digit target games this season, but if you feel like he's going to get a touchdown, then you start him. This week, I feel like he's going to get a touchdown, so I'm going to keep it open. I was going to keep it closed, but I think he scores this week against the Patriots, who's the defense isn't like what we've known the Patriots defense to be. So I'm going to keep it open on Marvin Harrison Jr.
I'm reluctantly keeping it open as well, to your point, Lawrence, about potentially scoring this week. He's had back-to-back games with multiple end zone targets. Like, they're trying to get him the ball in high leverage situations. Again, multiple end zone targets each of the last 2 weeks. The volume hasn't been there because it's all going to Trey McBride. But we talked about this the other day. Kyler Murray has, weirdly, had much better fantasy days when they win than when he loses. Like, you'd think negative game script, he would put up some junk time. It's just not happening. But he's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game in wins. And I think the Cardinals beat the Patriots. I think they're going to win this game. And so Kyler should have a good game here. Now, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. sees some Christian Gonzalez, which you don't love, but overall, the Patriots have been susceptible to wide receivers. They give up the 8th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last month. And so Marvin Harrison, who has at least a 20% target share in all but 2 of his completed games this year, he's going to get looks. He's getting multiple looks in the end zone in a good matchup against New England. He'll see some Christian Gonzalez, but I don't know. I don't feel like Harrison's the kind of guy that can get completely shut down. This is just a result of sometimes the passing offense hasn't always clicking. But against New England, I think they will. He's my wide receiver 29, so he's a low-end wide receiver 3, but I'm reluctantly keeping it open, Connor.
I think you have to. I mean, look at this Patriots defense right now, and Marv does give you a floor, as Lawrence pointed out. It's not like you're at risk with Jayden Reed, where it's like,
you could have 0.
I could have a 0-point day, and I lose my fantasy matchup because of that. If Marvin Harrison's bad day is 8 points, you still have a shot at winning. So overall,
you don't fear Christian Gonzalez anyway, because he already been getting shut down just by air. It don't matter what the corner. If he gonna score, he could score a touchdown over Christian. Yeah.
So. I think Gonzalez is great. I don't think he's quite in the Patrick Surtain.
No.
Absolutely
Correct.
terrified.
Our only tight end here, guys, Cade Otton. He's got the Chargers. It's slowed down finally for Cade Otton. Single-digit fantasy points in 3 of his past 4. But Matthew, this was somebody that people could rely on as a streamer, and then he never left your bench for the large part of the middle of the season here.
He was so good for quite a while there, but the challenge is Mike Evans is now back healthy. He's played 9 full games this year with Mike Evans healthy. And in those 9 full games, he's averaging under 7 fantasy points a game. He's got just a 16% target share compared with 26% without Evans. Compared with almost 19 points per game without Evans. It's just such a stark, massive difference. He hasn't been great recently, and it's not a good matchup against the Chargers, right? Since week 5, there have been only 2 tight ends that have even scored double-digit fantasy points against the Bolts. That's Trey McBride and Mark Andrews. I don't think Cade Otton is quite in that level yet, so I'm closing it out on Cade Otton. He's my tight end 17 this week.
Lawrence, you keeping this one open?
I'm closing it. Like Matthew said, the target shares just went down. Almost 10 targets per game in those 4 games without Mike Evans. That's now went to 4.5 these last 3 games. Talk about the matchup. They held Travis Kelce to 45 receiving yards last week. He had come into that game against the Chargers getting at least 60 in 5 out of his last 6 games. So it just doesn't bode well for young Cade Otton.
Yeah, there's just a lot of guys randomly getting involved in this Bucs offense, like Jalen McMillan. Right. Sterling Shepard's just constantly on my television screen when Bucs games are happening. So I thought that it would sustain more. I thought that he would get more of the Chris Godwin role, but it just hasn't really happened.
To recap, Matthews, keep it open or close it out rankings. Justin Herbert against the Bucs. That's an open. He's a top 15 play against the Bucs secondary. They've been the worst against quarterbacks in fantasy all year. Isaiah Pacheco, the volume is going up. He's got the Browns RB21. He stays open. Travis Etienne, it's the opposite. The volume's starting to go back down. He's RB30. It's a close against the Jets' run defense that has finally gotten it together. Deebo Samuel against the Niners. You like the matchup against the Rams, wide receiver 32. He stays open. Jayden Reed against the Seahawks, though, that's a close after the goose egg last week. He's wide receiver 41. Marvin Harrison Jr., Lawrence nailed it. The Patriots secondary, they do give up touchdowns to wide receivers. That's what's made Marv, during his good weeks in fantasy, very, very viable. Wide receiver 29. Cade Otton is closed, though, against the Chargers, tight end 17.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.